Hello, my friends. Welcome to a new day in our Lenten season. We are in our first week of Lent, and it's Tuesday. This is your pastor, Yeti, and all who come to listen to this podcast, you're welcome. Mark 3, verses 1 to 19. That's the whole for today, but we're going to focus on chapter 3, the verses 13 and 19. And maybe I never said it, but write these focus scriptures down so that you can read it and study it for yourself and meditate. Jesus went up to the mountain and summoned the people he wanted. And they came to him. He appointed 12, naming them apostles, to be with him and to be sent out as heralds, and to have authority to cast out demons. In appointing the 12, he named Simon Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. He named Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. The others were Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, the one who handed him over. You know, the revolution has become serious when its leaders appoint an alternative government. The Western world watched and waited in the early months. In 2011, as the Libyan rebels set up a kind of shadow body, there was still a government in Tripoli loyal to the longtime leader, Colonel Gaddafi. But away to the northeast, in one of the rebel strongholds, the increasingly influential rebel movement set up a body to administer the larger and larger area under its control. Now hear me, I don't want to dive deep in politics, but using it just as an example to use in this Lenten. Until we realize that Jesus' calling of the 12 must have felt a bit like, maybe like that, we won't get to the heart of what was going on. He was, after all, behaving as he was already in charge, speaking with authority and backing up his words with decisive and startling actions. This had already aroused hostility and threats from the existing authorities, both real and self-appointed. Undeterred, and Jesus moved ahead. His next action spoke volumes. Anyone behaving as if they're in charge and then calling people and giving them new names and apparently special roles is quite obviously making a statement. He is, it seems, consolidating his position. He isn't just a maverick going around doing bizarre and surprising things. He seems to have some kind of strategy. But the strategy has a clear symbolic value. Numbers speak volumes. If Jesus had given his followers 10 new commandments, the point would have been obvious. These were to replace the 10 given by God through Moses on Mount Sinai. What Jesus does is equally obvious to anyone with the least knowledge of ancient Israel and of the Jewish hopes of the first century. The people of Israel were a family, tracing ancestry back to the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, some of whom became famous: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and above all, Judah, Joseph, and Benjamin, and some of whom remained less so: Naphtali, Issachar, Asher, Gad, Zebulun, and Dan. The great primal collection of biblical books, the first 5 from Genesis to Deuteronomy, places special emphasis on the 12 and their particular callings. When the Israelites finally entered the Promised Land after their 40 years wander in the desert, Joshua parceled out the land between the 12 tribes, with the descendants of Levi living and working as priests and teachers among the others. After many generations, disaster struck. The northern tribes were carried away captive by the Assyrians, and nobody really knew where they were, or whether they had been simply dispersed. Only the tribe of Benjamin and Judah, and such Levites as lived among them, remained. Up till then, the people had been known as Israelites, the 12 sons of Jacob, whose special names given by God was Israel. Now they would be known as the Judah people. That's where the modern word Jew comes from. But there were some great ancient prophets who had predicted that when God restored the fortunes of his people, he would call the 12 tribes back into existence. There can be no doubt that this is the message Jesus wanted to convey when he called 12 from among his followers and spoke of them. As such, this was not simply a renewal of Judaism. The Judah people, this was a renewal of Israel itself. This was a going back to the beginning move. It was almost as powerful and as dangerous a plow as it would be today if an apparently self-appointed leader were to call a press conference in front of Buckingham Palace or on the White House lawn, or were to build a new official house and called Buckingham Palace or the White House. 2 other features of Jesus' call of the 12 stand out particularly. First, it forces us to ask, as do Jesus' actions, who does he think he is? Is he not the first of the 12, a kind of first among equals? No. He calls the 12 into existence. That makes him at least a new Jacob. But perhaps he is going further. It is, after all, God himself who called the people of Israel to be his people. The second feature reinforces this first one. Jesus gave to some of the 12 new names. He named Simon Peter, which means rock or stone. James and John, the two sons of Zebedee. He names Boanerges, which means thunder sons. But this is more or less what God had done with some of the original patriarchs. God named Abraham, father of many nations. Genesis 17, verse 5. He renamed Jacob Israel, prince with God. Genesis 32, verse 28, and chapter 35, verse 10. The new name carries a meaning, and the meaning indicates the purpose of God. We might perhaps have been tempted to pass over this list of the 12. We don't know very much about most of them, a bit like the original 12 Israelites patriarchs in fact, but the fact that there were 12 of them speaks more powerfully than any individual achievements, and it speaks right through the ages to us as well. The early Christians were quite clear that though Jesus had called the 12 as a foundation for his work, he had then built on this foundation and was continuing to do so. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20. And Jesus himself promises in the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 17, that he will give a special new name to all those who conquer, who hold out in the war against wickedness and corruption. The promise holds firm and good for every single one of Jesus' followers today. Read the list of names slowly once more, only this time in between each of the 12 whom Jesus called, and place the names of your Christian leaders, teachers, and friends. Right in the middle, place your own name, and pray that God will enable you to hear him call you once more by name, as he called you in your baptism, and show you how you too can be part of his alternative government, his project of kingdom and renewal. Because he came, and he will make everything new. Almighty God, you called Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12, and through Jesus you called the 12 apostles. Call us afresh today. Name us once more to carry forward your purposes in the world. I encourage you to do that. May God bless you and guide you in another day of your Lenten journey. God bless. Bye-bye, my friends. This is Pastor Yeti.